Welcome everybody to base camp and a winter wonderland. So everybody's doing out there. Was that good?
Good.
Awesome.
You got in here just before the snow.
Yeah, I was deathly ill yesterday and feeling moderately well today, so don't come up, run up and give me hugs. So I guess we have no Kenzie, or do you want to come in and say something?
No, I think I'll pass.
All right. All right. Hey, will you make sure they do an overall, or did they already?
Yeah, I'll call her.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, we got Sam here today that's going to go over some legal stuff with us, which that's always exciting. It's the reason I chose Good, the Bad, the Ugly. So with that being said, Sam, it's all yours.
All right. So,
Woo!
we are super excited to talk about the law
Yes.
today.
You gotta get
Got
the
some
muscles.
handouts.
Thank you.
here.
Do we hand them out for you?
Sure. Well, thank you. So today we're going to talk about the newest form from the UAR, the newest forms. There's an update to a couple forms we're all familiar with, and then a new form. I've got another form we can talk about if we want, or you guys can just pepper me with your legal woes, and then I can give you fake legal advice. No. We can talk about issues that you're experiencing and questions that you have. You can note. I know there's some agents who call me from time to time and say, hey, can you come to a base camp because I have a lot of questions. So if you think of the questions while we talk about these forms and these updates, I'm happy to go over them. So let's start with wire fraud. Has anybody been involved, not in an illegal way, but we've been witness to wire fraud. We have one. I want to hear these stories.
So on our team, we were on one of the biggest ones. The seller, or no, the buyer got instructions on where to wire their money, and they did. And in the process, the title company got the same email, and they wired $30,000 to someone else.
The title company. So we're gonna let's remember that piece for a minute.
It actually came from the title company to the buyer. The buyer wired it. Title company approved it, and they didn't look at the email address that it was coming from.
Scary. How much? 30?
Because it
was,
looked so close to.
I'm gonna say this number, and you're gonna go. Did he
They
just say
lost it.
just? Was it just 30,000?
Yeah, just 30,000, right?
Just 30,000.
I've heard of worse.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm gonna
So
tell
it's
you
the
worse.
one that just happened.
So is the
recently.
title company responsible for covering that?
Because
Oh
it,
yeah.
because it came from them, and
Yeah.
it was so close to theirs, they didn't even realize that it had happened.
Yeah. Yes.
One's very similar to that. I just had a transaction where I was working where I think it was the mortgage company actually wired the money one digit off to the wrong account. And so they had to give permission to get the money back.
Yeah.
They did, apparently, and then resend it to the right one.
That's frightening too. The mortgage company. Rick?
We had one of our agents who was in a cash transaction, and the wiring instructions looked like it come from the title company, but it did come from the title company, and it was one digit off of what identical to what the title company. And they made off with $150,000.
Oh.
Before they was able to catch it, they had already burnt through 40 grand
Oh,
of the money. So, but they were able to go
They
in
got
and
it
freeze
back.
Well, they were able to go in and freeze it because it was wired to the wrong account, which was not seen in the fine print.
Yeah.
So,
So I want to tell you,
That was deliberate, right?
oh yeah.
wire fraud. It's something we've been hearing about for a long time, right? I mean, I think years ago, Vanguard was showing up with a little pamphlet of these things, going, "Hey, wire fraud! Be careful, wire fraud!" And the concern then was that hackers, the bad guys, whoever, were spoofing emails. So they were taking email addresses and saying like, Century 21, but the one is an exclamation point, .com, right? So it looks right, but it's not right. And so Sam at century2 exclamation point.com, here's your wiring instructions. You're going, oh, Sam, I know Sam at Century 21. That looks right. And then the wiring instructions were routing it to the wrong place, right? And that's now what I look at and say that's old school wire fraud. That's too easy, right? We've been warned for years about this, and go back, verify with the source, independently verify with that source, meaning call the title company or whoever's sending you the wiring instructions at a number you had, not the number on their email, right? And make sure that you're safe. Well, I think the world was warned about that scheme and got a little savvy, not totally savvy. People still do crazy things, like title companies don't check the email and verify stuff. But I think most people got more savvy. So what did the hackers do? They got more savvy too. And recently, the last one that I was involved in, which was last week, and it happened to be a transaction here, the what do you want to call them? What are we going to call the wire fraud people? The wire fraudsters actually initiated contact with the buyer weeks in advance of closing, like emails. Like they started communicating, and was it the right email? Yeah, it was close, right? But they started to build this trust relationship with the buyer. Hey, here's some stuff, and they were just some transactional details, just little things. So I started to build up that confidence with the buyer, with using the bad email, right? So it's not wire fraud. We've told everybody, if you get wiring instructions, then you look. The problem is they started a relationship before the wire instructions came so that they would build that confidence level. Wow. So that when the wiring instructions come, you're just comfortable. This is who I've been. It's right in the email track of weeks of email correspondence, right? On top of that, they actually somehow, I say somehow, now I'm going to talk about this in just a minute. I'm going to frighten us all, and then in just a moment. But they got the buyer's number, and they actually initiated a couple of phone calls with the buyer. So now we've got this really trusting relationship because the buyer is convinced that whoever's sending these emails and making these calls is a representative from, it was really from, who was it from? From the title company, I think it was, if I remember correctly.
So they were representing the title company?
They were pretending to represent the title company. Wiring instructions come, it was more than 30 and it was more than 150, and they wired.
Wow.
And it was emailed wiring instructions, and they wired.
Oh my goodness.
But it was to the same, came from that email address where we've had, so these wire fraudsters have gotten really savvy. So it looks like now they've upped their game, and instead of just out of the blue wire instructions from Sam at century2!.com, you've got a whole bunch of it, just information that looks like it's about the deal, and then just in that email track, wiring instructions. So why would we have any reason to doubt that, right? Yeah.
Do they ever get their money back?
Yes. So here's what happened. It was a Vanguard transaction. Louis happened to hear about it, like shortly after, like right after it happened. He was driving past, and where it went, it was wired to a Wells Fargo account and was about to be bounced offshore. Vanguard doesn't bank at Wells Fargo, they bank it somewhere else. I can't remember, to be honest. Chase?
I think.
It's one of the C banks. I think it's Chase. Anyway, bank at Chase. He heard about it, went, wait a minute. The buyer just called to verify that we got their wire to Wells Fargo. We don't pay. He happened to be driving down the road. There was a Wells Fargo. He pulled in, walked in, and said, I need to talk to somebody. My money that belongs in my account was just wired to your bank, and I don't bank here. So because of that, that buyer got all but $100 back.
Wow.
Okay.
Lucky.
Oh yeah. And really it was, I think Louis, he literally walked in and camped out until they could do something for him, right? So they got everything back but $100, which if I'm a buyer and I have more than $150,000 that is at risk, I'm more than happy to part with $100 to get my money back, right?
What was the
So
total?
good story. It was 154. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a chunk of change.
Yeah.
And
And
if
this
I
was
recall,
recently,
I
just
think that was
recently.
hard money lent 154, so it's like 187 by the time you pay it back. Yeah, just recently, like this month. This month happened. But the moral of that story is they're more savvy than just out of the blue wiring instructions. It looks like they're starting to initiate more contact to build, it's really build trust in that email address more than anything, right? So we need to make sure, yes.
So if someone's calling them and it's not the people that they've been dealing with, period,
Yeah.
then the buyers need to be educated on what, you know, on who they've talked to only. But I don't know if these wire fraud people can get names too, because I was just reading this on Just and Duty on the sheriff's department and how people are getting scammed on that. And I got scammed on it, but I didn't turn the money in. Same identical thing. So if we educate our buyers on a few of those things from the get-go, and then the title company also, on the closings I've gone to, have done the same thing. Educated the buyers on, this is how you do the money, here's the instructions, don't get anyone else's instructions, it's this or.
Absolutely. I love that. We're going to talk about educating them on the get-go, which is these changes to some of the UAR forms and a new form. Before we hit that, I'm just going to address two things. One, the problem with wire fraud is it's not bad checks, right? Once it's wired, if it hits offshore, goes somewhere else, it's gone. I mean, the beauty of wire transfers is it's immediate cash type transactions. The problem with wire transfers, it's immediate cash type transactions, right? I mean, if somebody steals your cash, unless you know the serial numbers, you're not getting that back, right? It's the same problem with wire. Once it's gone, it's gone. We're just talking about a lot more than the 20 bucks I have in my wallet right now.
They can trace it better than cash, though, right?
They can trace it to a certain extent, and then it's gone. And a lot of these guys, what it's doing is bouncing from, you know, that bank to another bank, and then with immediate wire instructions to then shoot it out offshore. And then it's very difficult to track. The wire fraud's a federal crime, so we've got federal agencies that need to get involved. But it's scary because it's very immediate and the impact's very serious. The other thing I want to talk about is how much personal information is out there of ours. And it's more than you would want, to be honest. It's more than you would want. Our firm we subscribe. We had to go through a bunch of security measures. But we're subscribed to some software that I could look any of you up right now and tell you your social, your entire family's socials, their addresses, their birthday, any personal information. It's there, right? Now, the way I'm getting it is legitimate. We've been qualified, you know, had to go through a bunch of stuff. What's crazy, it's out there, and it's all over. You know, we hear, I don't know, maybe you've heard of the dark web or the dark net, right? Basically, people are taking, packaging your personal information and just selling it to other people. So it's available, it's out there, and it's online. I've got a brother, he's an attorney, works with me. He has top secret clearance. Has anybody been involved with anybody who's had to get top secret clearance? We've all been interviewed, right? So this is what was interesting. I got a message from the federal government that China had hacked the database. They had everybody who had top secret clearance information, including their entire application, and the feds were just basically telling me, you should be aware that the Chinese they know who you are, and they know that you were, and so that goes for all of us now. Welcome to the club. Chinese spies could swoop in at night. They don't want
My
us.
son was putting in an application for where you pay your taxes.
IRS.
The IRS, and he had to go through a lot of stuff because he carried a gun and everything. And they started asking questions about me.
Yeah.
And it's like,
What'd you do?
well,
She forgot who you pay your taxes to. That's what
my
happened.
son said, I can't get the job without this information. That's what they told me. He says, Cindy, I'm gonna meet somewhere with a guy with a briefcase. I said, done, not even.
Yeah.
They wanted my social, they wanted where I was born, they wanted my birth certificate, all kinds of stuff. It's like, I'm your mother, I'm not you.
Yeah.
You can give
Interesting.
them information. I'm not, thank you very much.
So we didn't get the job?
Yes, he got the job. But he didn't need that information, that was someone else doing it.
It's scary. I mean, the information's out there. So now we've laid the groundwork. Let's talk about these new forms. Now we're all scared, ready to go home and take a nap. let's talk about the new form. I'm not sure how your packet is organized. Oh,
Here.
You wanna
I got it.
pick
you
it
know
up?
what? I'm going to take this one of these.
Yeah, I always tell my.
Okay, so the top, we all have the wire fraud disclosure on top.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the new form.
That's all fun.
Oh, here, take this. Rick will guide us through what is next. So this is the new form, but we're not going to start with this. We're going to start with, I think, the two forms that are underneath that, and you're going to recognize them as the listing agreement and the buyer broker. These were changed as of just a couple weeks ago. There's some new language, and let's point them out. What's the next form right after wire fraud that you have?
Buyer
broker
agreement.
Buyer broker. Let's start with there. Okay. So the buyer broker. The good news is there's really no new things for you to fill out. It's just language you need to be aware of, which refers back to this new form. So let's look at paragraph 4, letter E. Okay. It says upon signing this exclusive buyer broker agreement, personally review and sign the buyer due diligence checklist form. I think we're all familiar with that. And the new language, and wire fraud alert disclosure. Okay? Let's go one more. Let's go to 10. Attachment. The buyer due diligence checklist form, and here's the new language, and wire fraud alert disclosure are incorporated into this exclusive buyer broker agreement. And we're going to go one more place, but we're going to pause here. So what this is saying now is that this wire fraud alert disclosure form, the new form, is now part of our buyer brokers if we're using the newest form. I know that Everest, we have our own tweaked version of this. We will be adding this language and using it on the tweaked version. So for all intents and purposes, this piece of paper should now be part of every single buyer broker contract.
So until we tweak ours, do we use this new one, or?
You can continue to use ours, but I want you to be in the habit
Sure.
of giving this out every single time regardless.
Perfect.
Right? Let's just get in the habit. And then paragraph 14, entire agreement. This exclusive buyer broker agreement, including the buyer due diligence checklist form, wire fraud alert disclosure, and additional addendum containing the entire agreement. Okay? So this has been very well incorporated into the buyer broker and should be used with it the same way you have the buyer due diligence checklist.
So if you don't have it, then is this contract not complete?
It's not complete. Yeah, if you don't have it, if you're not giving it, it's not complete. And we want to give it because when we start looking at it, you're going to see that this informs the buyer right up front, right? I mean, we're now engaging as your agent. Here's something about wire fraud, right? Is the next one the listing agreement, the exclusive right to sell? Okay, here we go. Paragraph 4 on this one. So I'm going to start it, but it says about halfway down. You can see there's a word that says upon. Upon signing of this listing agreement, the seller agrees to personally complete and sign a seller property condition disclosure form and the new language and wire fraud alert disclosure. Then I bet you can guess where else it is based on the buyer broker. Let's go to 11, attachments. Okay, seller's property condition disclosure form, the data form, and wire fraud alert disclosure are incorporated into the listing agreement by reference. And then 16, just right below it, this listing agreement, including seller's property condition disclosure form, the data form. I think I've said data and data both. Could be either. Are we feeling British or not? The wire fraud alert disclosure and additional addendum contain the entire agreement. So
What's the data form?
the MLS data form.
MLS? Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
the MLS data form.
Okay, they should put MLS.
Data, potato, potato.
Good ads.
Okay, so this wire fraud alert disclosure is now part and needs to be considered as part of the listing agreement and the buyer broker agreement. Okay, let's look at what it says. And I think we're back to the cover page.
Yeah, cover page.
Unless you have questions about what we just read. Just a couple of words added. All right, so this is just an alert, right? This is just us telling them there is a problem with wire fraud. There are some blanks we need to fill in at the top. I think we're all familiar with these blanks. The company is Century 21 Everest, right? You are the agent, so you put the company's name, your name, and then to whoever our client is, the buyer or the seller, right? So there's the top, how you fill that in. The rest of it is just something for them to read. It's a little like lead paint disclosure, right? So let's just read through it real fast so we're familiar with what it says. Big, bold, warning notice. And this is one, when you're going through, I think this one's important enough. It's not just another piece of paper in the stack that they sign. Make sure they read this, right? Point this out and say, hey, wire fraud's real. People are losing 30,000 or more. By the way, I've heard of up to 1 million, 1.3 million that did disappear and did not come back. That hurts, right? It's a chunk of change. Rick is still, yeah, exactly. That was in the California side of this thing. That's a lot, right? So this is worth taking a moment and just saying, hey, please read this and be aware wire fraud's real, okay? So we have warning notice. There are instances where cyber criminals are hacking the email accounts of parties involved in a real estate transaction and are sending emails with fake wiring instructions. These emails look convincing and legitimate. Never trust wiring instructions sent via email. You must always confirm wiring instructions in person or via a telephone call to a trusted and verified phone number. Never wire money without double checking that the wiring instructions are correct, right? There's a lot of stuff there that I'm not sure they're going to understand.
So if they do get wire instructions via email, then call and confirm that.
Call and confirm. And when it says
Use the phone number in the
a trusted verified email is don't use the phone number in the signature block of that email, right? Go online and look up XYZ title, or if you've been communicating with your escrow officer already, call that escrow officer.
Basically, we should be giving our clients a business card of the title.
I love it. Yeah, grab the escrow, your favorite escrow officer's business card and hand it to the client and say, here. If you do get emailed wiring instructions, make sure you call the number on this card.
And talk to this person.
Yeah. And use the code word cactus. No, you don't. Who knows? We might be there one day. But
only Sam.
I know. Get smart mentality.
I love it.
So talk to them about that. The other thing you may want to talk to them about is that, where did it say? How the emails look convincing and legitimate. Now that we know that these hackers, that these fraudsters are engaging in a relationship through email before wiring instructions come, I think it's important to say, look, if you get any emails from anybody saying that they're involved in this transaction, if you get an email from a title company representative, it looks like you get an email from me, double check that email address. Make sure it actually is a legitimate email address, right? It would not be hard for somebody to do Sam at century2!.com and you're going to think it's me. Actually, I don't have one like that, but I do have an Everest GP email. I could say Everest GB. And you go, oh, Sam at Everest, and then you just kind of trail on, oh, that's him, right? So I think it's worth saying, hey, they may engage you earlier in the process than wiring instructions. Make sure any emails you're getting are from title, from a legitimate verified title contact, or
Okay, obviously they're becoming aware that somebody is engaging in a transaction somehow prior to it, otherwise, or they're just fishing for somebody who is, sending a whole bunch of them out.
Yes.
Well, if your computer's been hacked.
Yeah, and that's where we think they're getting stuff and information is. They've hacked things like .loop. They've hacked things like, internal email servers. So they know that there's stuff happening. They obviously know. They're not just blasting it. I've never personally got wiring instruction via email that didn't have something to do with my job. Like nobody sent one to my samebell@gmail.com web address because I'm not engaged in a real estate transaction, right? They know whether or not you are, which means they've hacked into something. They might be in, SkySlope and Dotloop are really huge, document management systems for real estate brokerages. I would not be surprised if they're in those. We just don't know about it. It's kind of sad, really. Yeah.
It's been a little while, but I was getting attachment and links, and when I would open it up, it would give me instructions to call them with the phone numbers of my sellers or buyers because they didn't have it.
Yeah. As an agent, if you get something like that, and it's not from your favorite title person, and you know
Those are
it's
secure
your,
emails.
oh, are they? So they're the verified,
Like the title company will send over a secure deal, that's what you're talking about.
we have to log in to read the
Like
email.
with USAA, I mean, that file goes from one person to another, to another, to another, to another.
Yeah.
And you don't really know who you're talking to because the file flits all over the place.
Yeah.
But of course, when they ask for information on my seller or buyer, I'm going, I don't think so. I'll call them and verify and make sure that I'm giving information
Yes.
to the right person.
And that's okay to say, hey, let me call you back.
Yeah, but
And then you
still,
call the
it's
number
just-
you know
it's a
you're
big-
supposed to be
it's
calling, right?
It's amazing.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But talk to your clients about the idea that this email might not just come fresh with wiring instructions. You may be getting an email from somebody who's not actually involved in the transaction. Verify those email addresses before they even respond, right? Okay, next. Going on just down the punch list. In every real estate transaction, the buyer or seller is advised to never, this is what I love. We have 3 nevers and 3 always. And in law school, we're taught never say never and never say always, right? There's a never, never, and there's a never, always.
These are never, never.
There are never, nevers, right? There are never. But the forms committee that wrote this, which has a bunch of attorneys, decided we're going to say never a lot and always a lot, okay? So never trust wiring instructions sent via email. Never send personal information such as social security numbers, bank account numbers, credit card numbers, unless it is through a secured encrypted email or personal delivery to the intended recipient. We know that our emails are not secure, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not encrypted either. Never click on attachments or links from unfamiliar sources. These attachments or links may cause malware that allow a hacker to access your email accounts and other information on your computer. Always independently confirm wiring instructions by personally speaking with the intended recipient of the wire to confirm the routing number and account number. Always confirm that the contact information for the wire transfer recipient is legitimate. Call a verified number. Always take steps to secure the system you are using with your email account, such as using strong passwords and secure Wi-Fi. And then they have their little thing where they say, I acknowledge. What's nice is if there is an issue, this contains the websites and the contact information for the federal agencies that investigate this type of thing. Hopefully we never have to use those, right? Because they read all this and understood it and obey it, right? What's interesting about wiring is the brokerage, you may or may not know this, we have to pay Century 21 money to use their name and logo and all that stuff. I'm sure you all know it because you see it on your commission reports. That money's wired. Lately, we have been, as a company, instituting safeguards similar to this, even though we wire them all the time, to verify that. To verify those are the recipients. Because what they'll do is they will email us. It's not an email that says bank account, routing number, but they'll send a piece of paper that's an attachment to an email to us saying, hey, can you wire it to, here's where we need you to wire those franchise fees. We've been calling Century 21 to say, did you send this? And we're calling the people we deal with, saying, is this correct? Is this the right information? Last thing we want to do is pay a bunch of franchise fees to
Somewhere else.
to the Prince of Nigeria who needs a little extra money. Right? Yeah, exactly. We don't want to watch that disappear. And that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. We don't want to be a story. So, as a company, we're doing this with our transactions too, knowing that maybe, I haven't heard of that, like franchise fee wire fraud be a thing yet, but once all of our buyers and sellers are savvy enough, they got to find somebody else to pay for their yachts and jets, right? So they're going to start looking at businesses it's only a matter of time until they start looking at business to business wire transfers and saying, oh, in fact, if any hackers are in here, business to business wire. Any questions on this form? When do we use it?
Always.
Always.
Always. And we never say always except for when it comes to this, right? Excellent. No questions? I know I said any questions and then I turned my back and walked away. It's the questions I like to answer.
Wanda wants to know when we should start using this, and I
Use
said
it now.
right now.
You
Well,
can
I
use it
know
right
we use
now.
it now,
Always.
but do we use it with the clients we're working with right now?
Yes, oh yeah, if you're working with clients, you have
Just
active
this
clients,
page, or do we
you
go-
can just give them this page,
Okay.
right? This is just a disclosure.
Okay.
Doesn't change anything, it just
Okay.
hopefully makes them more sophisticated.
Okay. Sounds good.
Right? Yeah, yeah, you can use it with everybody you have pending right now. Good with that? See, that time I turned and looked at you and said, good with that. All right.
And we're recording.
So we have
so-
a new, all this is new.
Those are all new, and
It
then
won't be in dot loop already, right?
Not the Century 21.
I don't,
is it?
the wire fraud disclosure is in dot loop, but the buyer, broker, and the listing are not yet. Because
We're still tweaking.
I'll tell you, we're making a couple of tweaks. I'll just give you a little preview. The buyer broker. We've run into some issues where you're selling like to-be-built construction, right? So they want to buy a lot, they buy the lot. You know, it's not the builder buys the lot. Your client buys the lot, then hires a builder to build on that lot. It's all part of the same transaction in our world, right? We just sold them new construction. But in the world of the law and those tricky, slimy lawyers, it's two transactions, right? You have the land purchase, which is one transaction, and the build job, which is another. We've had some agents who, the builder or the buyer, our formerly very faithful, loyal client, have tried to burn us on the commission for that piece.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
That'd
if
be
you've
the last time.
sold land and buildings, the land is the cheap part of that deal, right? The building's the expensive part. You'd rather get paid on both. So we're changing the buyer broker to say that if you sell in that situation, you've earned a commission on both the sale of the land and the cost of the construction, so that we eliminate a little loophole that's there. And then we're amending it to do some different things with lease options as well. So you get paid on the lease and you get paid if they exercise the option. We like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, for instance, like with Ivory Home, where they take the land out because it's already another. So now, like, not just Ivory, but a lot of builders. I just have
Yeah.
one at D.R. Horton, so they take the land out of the purchase price.
Yeah, so if we're buying from the builder seller who owns I mean it would allow us to be paid on the land and the build job. In all situations.
But our buyers would have to pay the difference.
The buyer would have to pay the difference, but we can always negotiate, right? We can go have the buyer negotiate with the builder and say, look, you gotta up the commission to this, or I'm gonna have to pay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not-
and we know that we don't negotiate commissions in Rep Cs, but we can have our buyer negotiate closing costs with the seller, which may include some closing costs to go towards commission. You good with that?
Yeah.
If it's
Say that
news,
again.
I can draw it on the board and we can talk about it. in
Can you say
detail.
that again, what you just said?
Okay,
Yeah, say it.
we don't negotiate our commissions in Rep Cs, right? The Rep C is a buyer and a seller, not an agent and a buyer and a seller, right? So we don't ever want to say commission in a Rep C. However, if your buyer's obligated by the buyer broker to pay you more than what the BAC is, your buyer can negotiate more closing costs with the seller, those closing costs being the difference between what we're getting in BAC and what the buyer owes under the buyer broker. I'll just use an example. I mean, we might get a little crazy with the new
It doesn't
construction.
say to be used for commission,
It just says
additional closing.
closing
So,
costs.
Sam,
And-
I had one
Yeah.
lender absolutely refuse to allow that, like, we did that where
Wait, one lender?
lender refused to allow it to happen
Mhm.
on a new
The
build.
closing costs?
They
Because it
refused to
exceeded
allow the
probably the
additional
allowable.
amount
Yeah.
that we got in closing costs to go goes, if it went over that.
So that exceeded the allowable, is that why, like Fred
Yeah.
said?
Yeah.
So you gotta be careful with that. But there are situations, say homey, right? I think we've probably all seen homey listings where the BAC number gets kinda wonky. I saw one where it was
$500.
0.03%. We all know that 0.03 is the decimal representation of 3%, right? But when you put a percentage on, now we're talking about 1.03%. So we've just taken a commission that might be several thousand and turned it into several tens or several ones of dollars.
So can
And I don't think we're here working for ones of dollars. That's way less than you paid for gas to drive
So
over the
can't
house.
you, instead of negotiating with the commissioners, I believe the verbiage is that the seller to pay selling brokerage or listing brokerage, whichever one you represent, X amount of percentage of the purchase price of the property. Where it's directly the seller, you're not going to the seller's brokerage.
I don't know if that gets us around the closing cost issue. I'd love to talk to Lynn
I
about
got
it.
it from Rob,
Okay.
the verbiage that we use, and I
Yeah,
just copied it.
Rob and I wrote the verbiage.
Yeah,
I don't remember what it says.
I-
It's my specialty. I will write something beautiful that works and forget immediately what it said.
But the way it is that we're asking the seller, we're not asking the seller's brokerage.
Yes.
Because we cannot ask
Asking
the
the
seller's
seller.
brokerage. We're
Exactly.
asking the seller directly
And
to
it's the
pay
buyer
X
asking the
percent.
seller to pay something
Yeah,
on the
because
buyer's
it's in the
behalf,
contract.
which is okay.
Yeah.
Right? That's just part of the deal. That just factors in the seller's net. That's not us.
And then do you send escrow instructions at the same time? Or that can come later?
No, that can come later, right? Because now instead of it coming
Because
from
the escrow instructions
them
don't
splitting
go
up
to
the
broker.
commission, it's another line where they're gonna be adding some.
You don't need escrow instructions for that.
Yeah, yeah, because the other broker's not agreeing to that,
Yeah.
the seller's agreeing to it.
I took a CE class and it was given by I forget his name, the attorney that does the hotline.
Yeah, either Craig or Lance.
Yeah, one of them. And
Was it the redhead or the super skinny dark hair guy?
super skinny, I think.
Yeah,
It was
Lance.
super skinny redhead.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Fred?
Anyway,
Don't you have that call you gotta be on?
And he's the one that said the same thing,
Yeah.
that you can, if they're getting like 2% VAC, negotiate that 1% from the seller.
From the seller. Yep, the buyer negotiates that 1%.
So how do you document that then to get paid?
Is part of the contract.
Well, it becomes part of the rep C. So it's an addendum to the rep C saying,
But then you just have the seller.
and it has the magic language that I.
Just have the
Yeah.
buyer that makes the extra half a
The
percent.
magic language I have written in my cut. and
Yes.
paste.
It's on the settlement statement.
So, and then it would show up on the settlement
It
statement.
was actually.
So you would just direct the title company to
Yes.
increase that.
Yep, you'd say, hey,
On the
this
buyer.
addendum, it says
For the buyer.
they're gonna, the seller's gonna contribute another 1% towards, and that needs to be payable to Sam Bell. That needs to be payable towards.
Well, they do that verbally? I mean,
They'll do it. The title company?
contract?
Yeah, the title company.
It doesn't seem like there's a paper trail for that money.
Gotta be in the
It's in the contract.
It
So
doesn't
it's a
say
s-
in the contract it's an extra 1% for.
You gotta put it in.
It says it's
Get
gonna
it.
be the closing costs.
Well, and I think we may have said payable to Century
Yeah,
21
it
Everest.
goes
So
to
the
the
seller's
broker.
agreeing to pay the brokerage.
Yeah.
Oh,
An
so
additional
that's what I'm talking
1%
Yeah.
or.
Yeah.
And we have the language, it's, Rob has it, I could look through my,
If you look at Tuesday
files.
tips about 5-6 months ago, it's in there.
yeah, that's about
We'd
right.
like to- I'd love to call it up and say, hey, send me another $500.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Make sure your buyer and seller negotiate it though, right? That's the
You don't
main
negotiate,
takeaway.
you tell
And if you
them
want
to
the precise
negotiate.
language, you can call me or Rob,
But
and
so
we'll
no,
get you
but-
the precise language.
When you say have the buyer negotiate
Can't believe we're
it,
filming this. Sorry, you're all on film.
But, yeah, that's what I'm saying, you don't mean the buyer actually negotiates it, we as representing our buyer
Yeah,
negotiates
but it would be the buyer signing it then.
Yeah, so
saying-
you have to
Okay,
explain
okay.
to
Yeah.
your buyer.
So you're gonna explain to the buyer, hey, look, here's the problem. You fell in love with Homey House, and they're only gonna pay me $15 to sell it. And it cost me $15 to drive here today to meet you. That doesn't work. And you have agreed to pay me 3% plus whatever, right? You're doing an admin fee on top of that. And so, what I don't want to have you do as a buyer is get into a situation where suddenly you have to pay me even, you know, so here's how we recommend you negotiate. Let's ask the seller to pay that.
I've actually
Now
done
it's the
that.
verbiage.
You've done it.
I've done that I think 5 or 6 times.
Yeah,
And I get, the other agent always says, oh, you can't do that. And I say, well, that's fine. We'll figure it out, but I can't do it. And
here's the good news is you can tell them,
and so
tell the
language,
hotline. 'cause
if I remember
the
right,
hotline's gonna back
it
this up.
says buyer and seller both agree that seller will pay buyer's agent 1% commission.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, that
Pretty
works
simple.
too. That
Yeah,
works. That's
I
great.
did that
Thank you.
once too, and the agent came back pretty fired up that I tried to negotiate the contract.
Yeah, because we've all been beat to death, like I did in the beginning. We never negotiate commissions, but buyers can.
Yeah.
See, that's the caveat. Buyers can negotiate. Right? And if our buyer's on board and the buyer's, even though we're negotiating, the buyer's signing the addendum.
And if you
it's
tell
actually
your like the buyers initially when you're sitting down with them that this can happen, like there's these, you know, so then when it does happen, they're already, you know, future paced.
absolutely set that expectation. I will show you any house on the MLS. There are some guys playing games with how I get paid through the MLS, and I don't want you to have to fork out money, right? The idea is I'm working for you, and they're going to pay me for doing that.
I have
This is
one
how we're
story
gonna do it.
about that.
Yes.
In fact, the very first time I was going to do that, I called the listing agent up and said, hey, what's going on with the commission? I just want to find out, you know, if we can work this out. And I told him how I was going to put it in the addendum with my offer. And he said, oh, no, don't do that. Just, you know, send the offer. He's like, I'm going to change it on the MLS right now. And then just send your offer. And so I figured out what he was doing is he didn't tell his sellers he was offering 2.5%.
Less. Yeah.
So it
Which is a
matters-
game that's
Oh.
being played now.
Right.
Then maybe even people in this room are playing that game.
So
Anyway.
I had a client down in Utah County where 2% was what was being offered, so I wrote that verbiage in the offer when I sent it over because the agent just wouldn't answer my phone call. The agent called me livid because his client was livid because he was charging his client 7%
And
and he
What?
was getting 5.
Yeah, what's interesting is the seller knows how much they're paying, right? We don't know how much the seller's paying, but the seller does.
So
If somebody shows up, they may go, are you trying to cheap out?
But is that any of our business? So because as a buyer's agent, you know, when they've asked, do they have?
It's none of our business, right?
Yeah, they're
what our
that's
business is
why-
what our buyer agreed to pay
Yeah.
us and what we're going to get in BAC. And whether those numbers either match or are close enough that we don't care, or if it's like 0.03%. And so here's a crisp $10 bill. Thank you for selling this house, right?
To make sure I'm clear, if on an addendum, if you're missing $1,000, let's say in commission, you want it to be said, seller to pay Century 21, $1,000 commission.
additional.
In
Addition to the BAC offer.
On the MLS.
Is that the verbiage?
Yeah,
you want?
no, we
It's
have verbiage.
different.
I'm
It's
not
From
gonna.
Rob,
It's
yeah.
not.
I need to grab the verbiage. I'm not gonna rewrite it while I stand here. So, but we have verbiage. The company has verbiage that we have beat up time and time again and is being
Can you
used
send it
successfully.
out?
But yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Will you send it out?
Yes. I will find it.
Just have Rob.
I'm gonna have Rob send it out. I'm gonna tell Rob
Another
do
good
Tuesday
Tuesday
tip.
Yeah.
Redo that one,
Tuesday tip,
right?
But it's,
Just
we'll
have
do a
an
Wednesday
update wire
tip.
fraud.
An
Tuesday
additional
on
tip
this,
today.
Because
There you go.
it is a legitimate thing right now.
Okay. Yes,
Well,
we will do a new.
Any
Tuesday
agent
tip.
that tries to play the game with the commission, at the end of the day, at the settlement, they're gonna see it. So then it could hit the fan.
You mean the seller's gonna see it?
Yeah.
Now here's what the seller. Does the
Everything's-
seller really read every line of the settlement
No.
statement?
I mean, it depends
They're
if you go
looking
through
at the
the
bottom
title
dollar.
company, it depends on the title company and how they
I'm
go
the
through
seller.
things.
I've never looked at every line
But
of
you
the
know, I
settlement
have a
statement.
homie and it was 2% and you have to talk with the owner.
Yeah.
So I'm talking with the owner and I'm like, well, my buyer is signed a 3% commission and it's only showing 2%. She had a bid. She's like, no, we're offering 3%.
Ooh.
I'm like, oh, well, that's
Really?
not what it states here. So who knows what homie's doing.
This is not our bash on homie, but they did once offer. They did once offer a 1,500% commission. They
I
forgot
remember
to.
that.
And Rob Oakey called me. I got this call. And he goes, "Do you want to go halvesies on a house where I think just the commission will like make us rich beyond our wildest dreams, and we don't even care about the house, we burn it down or whatever." And we were writing an offer,
And they've changed
Rob and I
it.
were writing an offer,
And they changed
and they caught it and changed it. And what the best part of this story is, you know, Homie talks about how it's not a bash on Homie. I'm not bashing on Homie. Homie does advertise that they have attorneys, real live attorneys who will review the contracts, right?
Yeah.
'Cause somehow that's better than you guys using the forms. But here's the sweetest part of it. It was their head attorney's listing. She made the mistake of 1,500%.
That would have been sweet.
Oh, that's so sweet. So sweet.
They
This is the attorney I've sat across the arbitration table on various complaints that we filed against
Yeah,
Homie.
yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's gonna be awesome.
Loved it.
Did you
They
really
corrected
try
it before we could get an offer.
Would you really try to cash in on that? They didn't catch it?
Yes, 100%. I would that one so bad.
And he would have been smiling.
Yes, I would have. It might have been fun. I would have, and then we would have had a big pizza party right here in this room for everybody.
Every
Yeah.
Every day for a year.
Every day for a year. Yeah, we do the math. It was a $350,000 home. We were offering full price. 400. We'll go 400. Competitive market. Inventory as well.
Did you calculate what that would have been?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a 1 point something million in commission.
You went down there.
Not a bad day of work.
Oh,
I would have gotten the
boy.
weirdest hard money loan ever. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know.
right?
800%, you got it, buddy.
Yeah.
I'll have it paid next week.
You would have paid money.
Closed and her done.
Yeah. Anyway, Homie's a good company. They have decent. No, we're not talking about Homie. Go back. That's edited. Take that whole section out. Crazy Homie antics. We got what? 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You guys are gonna give me 10 more minutes. Okay.
So I don't see.
Do we have any other questions before I launch into this form? We don't have to launch into this form. I can
Sounds
ask
like a
any
setup.
weird things. Are you sure? You don't? Okay.
So
Hey, talk about-
let's go into it.
Let's talk about this form.
I just found out about
What
it.
is that?
So this is called I think it's the last form in your pack. It's called Resolution of Due Diligence Addendum. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a relatively new form. When I say relatively new, it was introduced at the UAR convention in September of 2017. So it's, you know, it's kind of new, but it's not one that I think has had a lot of publicity. And what this, which is why I'm here with it, because I didn't think it had a lot of publicity. It's meant to, at the end of, you go through due diligence. I should draw the timeline, right? So we go under contract, get seller's disclosures, or doing our due diligence, we identify issues that we want resolved. We know that banks don't like an addendum full of a list of problems. Makes them nervous, right? I know people write side contracts or things on other pieces of paper that say, hey, seller agrees to do all these repairs. I know it happens. I know it happens in Everest. And don't do that. That's not what you can do. Your license doesn't allow you to do that. And the banks will frown on that because it could be double contracts, which is a violation of the licensing rules. So you could be violating your... So that's a bad idea. This form is meant to help us resolve due diligence objections through the contract without scaring off banks or putting our licenses in jeopardy, right? And so what we have, so the situation is, the buyer has objections, we need to resolve those objections or the deal's dead, okay? So here's what we've got. One, we can adjust closing costs. So we have these checks, let me back up. We have these check boxes that we can check. And these are either ors, right? We can do one, check closing cost adjustment. We're going to adjust closing costs, put a number in there. That's nice, right? Gets the buyer a little concession to close. That's cute. You have a purchase price reduction. That seems pretty obvious. Here's the problems I see with 1 and 2, just so you know. If I need a new roof, and I am using all of my money to put down to get the house that needs a new roof, does a reduction in closing costs or a purchase price reduction
Cover it.
actually help me get a new roof?
Nope.
No, but I can tell my friends that I got the house cheaper, you know. That's something, I guess.
Closing costs will do a much better job than a reduction on the
Unless
price.
it goes over
Because
the
the-
allotted amount by the lender.
Yes.
True, but it puts money directly back. It puts that number directly back into your pocket where the purchase price only puts back.
Some, if any.
5%.
Yeah.
But they can't put money back into a certain, they can only put a certain amount, otherwise they can't do that kind of thing out loud
Exactly.
during closing.
So 1 and 2, I think they're great ideas, right? They certainly solve a problem if it's the right solution without offending a bank or without offending, a seller. For a seller, it's really easy. I'll just have a little bit lower seller's net. On the listing side, you're going to sit down with that seller anyway and go, look, the roof's this big of a problem. It doesn't matter who buys your house. That money, you're going to have to either spend the money for the repair or not, right? So you can kiss that piece of your seller's neck goodbye anyway, right? But it's easy for them because they just accept less. They don't have to deal with repairs.
Right.
The next one, number 3, which is deceptive. Number 3 is the rest of this page.
Okay.
And number 3 is the seller's going to make repairs. And that box right there are the agreed upon repairs. So you're going to list out what repairs the seller makes. And anytime you list out, what's nice about that, what's nice about what they've done is they've helped fill in some of the errors that agents make. If you look above, it says, seller shall, through contractors, which sometimes agents say and sometimes they don't, right? Through contractors, complete the repairs to comply with applicable law. Now it's got to comply with zoning code, with building code, fire code, and it says including permits, inspections, and approvals. All repairs shall be performed in a workmanlike manner with materials of quality and appearance comparable to existing materials.
So the agent can't go to the front door, open it, roll paint on it, and then close the door, and then get the appraiser to pass that,
Yeah.
and then dump paint on the stairs.
That's
and
very
then roll
specific.
over it on
So
the way out, and
eerily specific
Sounds like
what
you
you're
have a
saying.
problem.
Specific.
She has a friend.
I paid for the door for my client because that is what the selling agent did.
We do not want commissionectomies. So the form language helps solve some of those. Yeah.
It helps solve some of it, but I had a situation where the sellers got their own, I didn't have this form,
Yeah.
but the sellers got their own guy to go up there and do the work. It was pitched just like this.
Oh.
And so he lost all his subcontractors to help it out. They went past the deadline. We
Mhm.
did an addendum.
Mhm.
But then the how do I put it? It's just like in a new construction. It complies with that certain amount of completion to be done, and there is a loophole there that they don't have to totally refinish it because it's the completion is not based on a total.
Yes.
So I wonder how we can.
Well, this helps solve that, right? Because if you agree to, replace the roof with me, regardless of what the lender thinks or when the lender will fund based on a percentage of the completion, you still have to finish it because seller agreed with buyer that it would be completed. So, so here you would write in the repairs that you have concerns about. Now 3.1 deals with what happens if those repairs are not completed prior to the settlement deadline. I'll give you an example. We can look right out this window at these apartments. They have snow on the roof. I don't know a roofer in the state of Utah who will jump up there and replace those roofs. They're going to tell you, wait till it melts. They may even tell you, wait till spring. But I want to close before Christmas. So that repair is not going to be done. That's what 3.1 addresses, repairs unfinished prior to the settlement deadline. Now in 3.1 we've got some options, right? It says we're going to escrow the money, which title companies hate. Lenders need to approve.
Lenders don't allow them as far as I know.
There's a few lenders that will allow them.
Only weather permitted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in my example where we've got a weather problem, I think the lenders will allow that, understanding that we can't fix it now. What?
It's 1.5 times the amount.
Yeah, so it's a lot more, right? And what this says in 3.1 is that it talks about a lender having to give approval. It says the buyer and seller agree to escrow this money. It's going to be 1.5 times the amount, and we're basically going to agree to enter into escrow into an escrow agreement for what happens to that money. So it's what I like to call an agreement to agree. Okay. Now, the next boxes below that, A and B, talk about what happens if things don't go the way we want them to. Let's see. It says, in the event seller and buyer cannot agree on the escrow. So we have that agreement to agree, but then we don't agree, right? Then what happens? We have to anticipate that in advance and check A or B. Say, okay, we're going to agree. Now we can't agree because seller finds out, oh wait, it's 1.5 times. No, I think I said $1,000. I'm only going to give 1,000, not 1,500. Now we got a problem, right? So what do we do? Do we do A or B? A says the buyer may cancel the Rep C in addition to return of the earnest money deposit or deposits if applicable, except from seller's liquidated damage, more earnest money, right? So it's earnest money times 2. So we can pick that. So if the seller goes, I only agreed to do 1,000, it's 1,500, and you've checked A, buyer can go, great, I'm walking, and now I get my earnest money back, and I get an amount equal to my earnest money from you, seller. Okay? Or B, buyer may complete the purchase, then pursue any other remedies available at law after closing. So circle that one, say Sam wants this always to happen, and you call him to sue. That's not, I would usually check A, unless there's something really big going on. B is, we're gonna close and sue you after the fact, which is expensive. And you get your attorney's fees back, but still, it takes time. The court is not fast.
The due diligence deadline?
Yeah.
When do they cancel? Well, so this is talking about settlement deadline, right? So we come up to the settlement deadline. The escrow officer hands us an escrow agreement to escrow those funds. Seller says no.
Yeah, mine did.
We're at the closing table and we go, they're not going to sign these. Then we're out, right? So it gets us. The time is not defined on that cancellation. It's just
That's right,
It
up
actually
till
says
settlement.
deadline.
up until settlement deadline, but it could be at settlement
that?
that we
At
would.
settlement.
Yeah. Okay, and then number 4 says, if we enter into this, the due diligence condition is now waived, right? Do not use this if we're not done with our inspections, right? This is supposed to solve all of our due diligence woes. If we don't know what those woes are, don't fill this out yet. It's not time, right? This is the very last thing you would do. Give yourself enough time that it can be signed prior to the due diligence deadline expiring, right?
So coming from a seller standpoint, if I received one of these.
Yes.
And they wanted 1.5%, how do you have that conversation with the seller? Because I'm one that I will have that conversation with the
Oh,
seller.
please. Everybody hear that? We should all be that one that will have
I
that
would
conversation.
want to be able to tell my seller, well, what is not used is given back. Now, is that
What is
actually
not
what it
used?
says?
Well,
But that's what it doesn't say. And so
it
that's
doesn't
like-
say that here, right?
Yeah.
But in the escrow agreement, it should say that, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, but if it doesn't, what kind of assurances can I give my seller that what's not used is escrowed back?
Here's what I would say is, hey seller, typically escrow companies can require 150% of the cost of the repair to be held. Now this is an agreement that we're going to have another agreement that tells us all of the details about what happens and how that 150% is dealt with and who gets a refund. What I would do is say we want to contact whoever we think will be the escrow officer on this and get, by the way, this is a form agreement they have, right? We want a copy of that form so we at least are making an educated decision on, are we actually, do we know what we're agreeing to agree to in the future?
Yeah, because I know this would be a hot point for the sellers.
Yeah.
Well, at one time, we were able to pay the contractor based on the bid given.
Yeah, half
And then
up front.
Well, just paid for right at closing,
Yeah,
given to A&A Roofing.
which we've done before as
And,
well.
and then there wasn't required to.
But if you can't find the world's most honest contractor, then you got escrow, right? Yeah, you got a question. Carl.
Yeah, just one quick question. In the Repsy contract that I recently worked with, there's a place where you can say, buyer can ask for up to certain amount of money for repairs. And in this case, we have $500 in repairs, and the repairs cost $750, so we're gonna need they're gonna use $250. We're gonna get this buyer each 250, the seller each 500.
Yeah.
Is that, this gonna change any of that?
Yeah, well, yes, you should be doing it here. I would be making the adjustment here. I mean, you could still do it that way.
I mean, that's
This is
where-
just another solution to solve due
So-
diligence
Okay, so-
problems.
So this here, can actually replace that in the original signed contract?
It can, but I
A
wouldn't
mastermind
introduce
agreement.
this until after due diligence is almost complete. Until we've completed due diligence and know what our concerns are.
So
If you know up front that there's already issues that need to be resolved, I would do that by a separate addendum. Because this, I mean, you can check. So in 4, I said only use this at the end of due diligence. In 4A, you can check buyer's due diligence is not complete. If you're on the seller side and you get 3 of these, you get one, you go, okay, I'll do a purchase price, and then you get another one, say, oh, more purchase price. You're going to kill the deal. I would say ignore that. Never use this until your due diligence is done and you're ready to just resolve it all. Right?
Okay, our little think tank over here, you might want to
Uh-oh.
come sit down.
Ah!
So,
You can sit down. Hold on. I think it is after
Right after.
12:30.
too bad.
If you're done, go back to work. If you want to stay for the think tank debate, you're welcome to stick around.
So our-
But thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Sam.
Real quick,
What's the
Yeah.
think tank?
so,
I don't know. They're gonna ask me some questions I think I don't have the answer to.
this form is, I mean, what if the buyer wants